Welcome to the Burnsville Chamber Candidate Meet the Candidate Forums. I'm Jennifer Harmoning, President of the Burnsville Chamber of Commerce. And with me to facilitate our discussion today is our Public Policy Chair, Brady Folkstead. Brady, you want to take it away?
Yes, thanks, Jennifer. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this afternoon. I'm Brady Folkstead, Public Policy Committee Chair, and I work with Lakeview Bank here in the area. Thank you for joining us on Meet the Candidate for Senate District 52. Today we have with us Stephen Lowell. He is the Minnesota GOP endorsed candidate for Senate District 52 Senate race. Not able to join us today is our DFL endorsed candidate, Jim Carlson. With that, we will be following roughly the same format here, giving Mr. Lowell a minute to answer each of our questions after his initial introduction of himself. With that, Stephen, I'll turn it over to you. If you could tell us a little bit about yourself and let us know what motivated you to run for office.
All right. Well, I'm a regular everyday guy. We've seen some turbulent times in the state of Minnesota in the last couple of years, and that has brought me great concern. I'm somebody that stayed well away from political parties for almost all of my life. The last couple of years, that's been different. I became a registered Republican just a couple of years ago, and the mayhem we've seen over the last couple of years has driven me strongly to get involved. I'm a firm believer that you shouldn't quit unless there's nothing else you can do. And so I thought, well, I will do absolutely everything I can possibly do to make changes and apply my gifts wherever they would be best served and wherever the Minnesotan public would be best served by them, which of course include me and my family. So I despise politics, but of course I despise burning buildings and massive riots and so on, much, much more. So I will happily brave politics and so on and so forth for people who maybe aren't millionaires and maybe aren't career politicians, who don't seem to have that connective tissue in terms of living circumstances and lifestyle with the everyday Minnesotan who is mostly impacted by said things like riots and brutal overtaxation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we're all kind of suffering under the force of the state in the state of Minnesota, though I would say we tend to achieve in spite of that. But anyhow, I'm a regular everyday guy. I punch a clock, I work a job, I have a son, he's 16 and a half. I worry for his future. I have I have a missus, we plan on having more children, and I'm very, very invested in the world that those children are going to grow up in, and I'd like it to be in Minnesota. And so with that, I decided I would get involved. I did not intend to run for Senate. But I showed up, and the people in my Senate District caucus were very, very, very adamant that I should be running after hearing me argue resolutions and so on and so forth. So hopefully their faith is well placed, and I do absolutely believe that I have the tools and gifts necessary to represent Minnesotans in Senate District 52 well.
Thank you very much, Stephen. And now we're going to kick off the portion where you have a minute to answer each one of these questions. Don't worry, I'll help you keep time and keep us on track a little bit here. But the first question we have for you is: there's currently a shortage of workers in all sectors of the economy. What can be done at the state level to assist in worker development for our local economies? And historically, immigrants have been relied upon heavily for additions to our workforce. How can we better integrate our immigrants into our communities?
Okay, so that's a question that Matt's gonna have a few angles to look at. So I want to start first with incentives. So I don't believe in the use of government force for absolutely anything unless it's incredibly necessary. Now, of course, worker shortages are a big deal, and I'm not going to pretend they're not. So we need to have that conversation and solve that problem. I think the solution starts with incentives, whether that's tax breaks, whether that's tax breaks for more marketing, for businesses to get out there that we need people, and this is what we're willing to offer to whomever will come and support the business that needs people. Because at the end of the day, our economy is run by businesses, and businesses are run by people. You need people, or your business doesn't run. Now, if the wage doesn't work out, or if what's on offer doesn't draw people, you're in some trouble. So whatever the state can do to reduce its burden upon these entities to help them continue to do business and offer more money to bring more people. I feel like that's going to be the play.
Thank you very much. The next one that we have is it's a perennial issue. If you've been following politics at all, I think this comes up every single time I've done these forums, and it's school funding. It's been a topic for a long time. One of the things that we wonder about is do you believe the funding formula for schools needs to change? If so, what do you believe those changes need to be to either change the formula or maybe increase the effectiveness of the school funding dollars that are currently being deployed in our public schools?
So personally, I take a results-based perspective on these things, the school, because education is on my website. It is a big part of what I stand for, especially as somebody who has a child and wants more children. So clearly I have skin in this game. Now, at a $10.5 billion budget for education right this second, I can honestly say my kid's not getting a $10.5 billion education. And I can tell you right now, the teachers I've spoken to, the teachers I know, they're not getting a $10.5 billion education budget paycheck. So we have an enormous disconnect between funding and results. And given that it takes 14 years to produce an employable adult in our country, in the state of Minnesota especially, and we're supposed to lead on education, that's ridiculous. Now, I am a firm believer you don't change anything that you don't fully understand, because you're probably going to break something. It's unlikely to help. So I don't think that cutting funding right this second is the answer. I think the answer is taking a fine-tooth comb all the way through Minnesota education and find out where that money's going and find out why it is our children are waiting 14 years for a worthwhile paycheck as opposed to waiting maybe 12, 10, or 8.
Thank you. Next one has to do with regulation. So it's been widely publicized that the state of Minnesota signed on to and the MPCA signed on to the California emission standards in this past year. California has now banned the sale of fossil fuel powered vehicles beginning in 2035. How does this affect Minnesota? And is this something that you support moving forward?
So I steeply dislike regulations. I won't say that they don't do anything good to help, but I will say proving negative is complicated, and I'm not convinced. Now, I understand, and I am huge about the environment. Our planet's beautiful, and we should keep it as green and as verdant as we can. That being said, we also, in order to continue doing that, need to maintain our economies and our lives. If we can't do that, nobody's going to be interested in the environment if they're getting beaten over the head with it all the time. So my perspective on this is very simple. Reduce regulation and incentivize better behavior in markets. Banning fossil fuels, not going to help anybody. California is not a great model for many things, but definitely not for that. So if we're going to get people to vote, we're going to get people to be happy in their lives, banning the way they get to work sounds like the most ridiculous idea I've ever heard. So big no on that. And I think with incentives, and I think with the right promotions, the right marketing, it can be something done with no heavy-handed use of state power at all.
Thank you for that one. And I think the next one kind of follows into the same vein here. More than anything, I think the business community can deal with the hand that's dealt with to them, as long as we have consistency. In business community sense, that's with laws and regulation. As this past topic was signed on to executively, how can we prevent massive changes in government regulation every time a new governor is elected?
Well, we can make it a point of contention, a hard stop, that we do not want any more government manipulation in our markets. We have state meddling in our markets all over this country, and nowhere that happens does business improve. Nowhere. If somebody says business is improving, I'm skeptical of their honesty up front, mostly because that usually doesn't take place. Businessmen and women are people who predict the market based on natural market forces. If you unleash a ridiculous dragon of state power all over your market, nobody predicts that well. And usually it's a bunch of reps, sometimes in the Senate, quite often, who are going to be benefiting from this while they grease palms of people who can afford to take that L, so that way the little guy can't go out and innovate. And that's ridiculous. That cuts right to the heart of what America stands for, especially in the free market. So, short story long, I think that we need to make it a hard stop. No more meddling in markets unless it is absolutely necessary, and make sure the burden of proof is I.
Thank you, Stephen. I think, do we get your figures up? Okay, you're back. Sorry about that. Here's going to be your last question here. And
All right.
that's local businesses fare far better during periods of lower crime. Currently, the state and the nation have been experiencing an increase in criminal activity. What can be done at the state level to assist communities such as Burnsville to lower crime and general criminal activity?
Well, firstly, we need to make sure that our police are funded as they need be and that they're staffed as they need be. If there aren't enough guys, gals, et cetera, to cowboy up and save lives, you're not going to do well. So we need that. Now, I don't believe in a heavily militarized police, and I don't believe in a police that overreach. I do believe in constitutional policing, and that's a whole different conversation, but I do think they should have the money they need and the people they need to do the jobs we expect of them. Now, that aside, police aren't everywhere, and we have a very, very low police to citizen ratio in this country, and I'm proud of that. I think that's a wonderful thing in this country, especially compared to other places in the world. One of the reasons why we don't is because we have a robust citizens arrest law, and we have a Second Amendment. We have the right to keep and bear arms, and in the state of Minnesota, we're a shall issue state. However, the kind of regulations that prevent people from lawfully defending themselves are incredibly stifling. It is, once again, cheaper in this state to hand somebody your wallet when they have a gun in your face than pull your own weapon in defense. That needs to end, both on a personal and on a business level. Because if you're going to get robbed, the police aren't going to jump out of the wall.
Thank you. Stephen, thank you very much for joining us today. When you are looking at representing Senate District 52, please let us know in your closing remarks here why you'd be the best candidate to represent our area.
Absolutely. So the short and long of it is, demographically speaking, I am in the age and wage bracket of the vast majority of people in my Senate district. Right there in the middle, just like the vast majority of people that are there. My life is very similar to most others in my particular region, which means my life reflects theirs. Having a bunch of great high achievements as a politician is wonderful and all, but most people aren't super high achievers. Most people aren't millionaires. Most people don't live in mansions. So if that's how you live, that's wonderful and you're not a bad person, but you're not going to represent the people that you live around in the vast majority. And people need representatives, not just elected leadership. Representatives, people who know what your life is like, they've lived a life like that, they remember it clearly, and they can bring that to that representation. I bring that to this representation. I also focus on putting power down and not picking it up. I want the average Minnesotan citizen, my district and all districts, to have as much liberty as they can handle and to defend themselves as completely as they can without causing any issue. So that way we can be the fairest and freest society on the globe as the founders intended. And that's short and long of it.
Stephen, well, thank you again. Thank you all also for joining us today. This was Meet the Candidate, Stephen Lowell, Senate District 52, running for state Senate. He is the GOP endorsed candidate. Jim Carlson was unable to join us today. He would have been the Democrat endorsed candidate. We did extend the invitation to him. We also gave him the questions as well to make sure that we had the broadest representation possible. But thank you again, Stephen. We appreciate it very much for you joining us. With that, we'll hand it over to Jennifer.
Thanks, Brady. Thanks, Stephen. We appreciate your work here with the Chamber, Brady, your volunteer work, and Stephen, for your choice to run for office. We know it's a lot of work and we appreciate what every candidate puts into it. And that's why we put together, we feel it's important to have these Meet the Candidate forums. And we will have 7 of them in total. The recordings will all be posted on our Chamber YouTube page. And we look forward to helping you get to meet all of our candidates. Have a great day. Thanks.
Thank you so much.